Hello everyone and welcome to this new video of Deep in Politics. So today we will be studying and analyzing together the 2020 presidential election results of the state of Nevada. So as you see, the state of Nevada was won in the 2020 presidential election by President Joe Biden. He was able to win the state by a margin of 2.4% and more precisely by 50.1% to 47.7% to President Trump. And the result of these elections were very close to the result of the 2016 election. As you see here, candidate Hillary Clinton was able to win this election by also a margin of 2.4% and more precisely by 47.9% to 45.5%. So the Democrats were able to keep this state with them, but they weren't able to grow their lead over the Republican, which I think is good for the Republicans, especially that the state of Nevada has been shifting lately more toward the Democrat. So this might be a small turnout that might bring the state closer to the Republican in the future. So before diving into details about the state, let's see a little bit its voting history. So as you see here, until the 1980, the state of Nevada was always trending toward the Republican. The Republicans were able to win the state, and by a big margin, as you see here, they were able to win it in the 1980 by a margin of more than 30%, same for 1984. But after this, immigration toward the state of Nevada began, and it was a very big immigration. A lot of people began coming to this state, and most of these people were Democrat, tend to vote toward the Democrat, and this helped the Democrat close the gap that separated them from the Republican, and then to overturn the state and to win it since 2008. So the reason why this immigration played in favor of Democrat is that most of the newcomers to the state of Nevada came from California, which is a strong and heavy Democratic state. And since 2016, the state of Nevada also welcomed newcomers, and so the immigration toward the state of Nevada is still going, but it seems that the Republicans are being able to get back some of their voter, or to grow their voter base in Nevada, and so they didn't lose ground in 2020 compared to 2016. So this might help them win the election or take back the state of Nevada in the future. So now let's see some data about the state. So as you see here, it's a state that has a population of around 3 million US citizens, so it's not a very big state. It's a very diversified state. We have 48% of white, around 30% of Hispanic, 9% of black population, and 8% of Asian. So we have a big ethnic diversity here. And if you want to see the percentage of bachelor degree among the population of Nevada, it's a very small percentage. It's 25.7%, so it's 20% less than the average of the United States, which is 33.1%. So this low percentage of bachelor degree plays in favor of the Republican, as we see that rural voters tend to vote more for the Republican. However, the big ethnic diversity of the state favor the Democrat. So now, that being said, let's go to our tables to try and understand more what really happened in Nevada. So let's begin by studying the general result of the state. So as I said previously, the Democrats were able to carry the state by the same margin that they did in the 2016 elections, and more precisely by 2.4%. So as you see here, they were able, both the Republican and Democrat were able to gain 2.2% in the general result of the state compared to 2016, and this enabled the Democrat to keep the state with them by a margin of 2.4%. What's very important to see is that the general result reflects the immigration toward the state of Nevada, as both of the parties were able to grow their voter base by more than 30%. And when you grow your voter base by more than 1/3 compared to the last election, this means generally that the state is subject to a big immigration. So as usual, we will proceed in analyzing the result of the state by dividing our analysis in two parts. In the first part, we will be studying the result of the small counties of Nevada, whereas in the second part, we will study the result of the big counties of Nevada. So Nevada is a small state, and so has only 17 counties, 16 of which are small counties, and these are the states that you will be studying first. So as you see here, that out of 17 small counties, as you would expect, it's the Republican who improved more than the Democrat in these counties. They were able to improve in 10 out of 17 small counties, whereas the Democrats were able to improve in only 7. And as I said, this is something that we would expect since small counties generally tend to have rural voters, which tend to be more conservative and so vote for the Republican. But what's important, and what you will see right now, is that the counties in which the Democrats were able to improve were mainly counties where immigration is still playing a big role here. So these are counties that are still welcoming newcomers, and as I said previously, most of these voters, or most of this new population, tend to be more liberal and so tend to vote more for the Democrat. And this chart shows you that it's the Democrats who were able to heavily improved in counties that are still subject to immigration. So here we are talking about counties where there is a voter increase of at least 25% compared to 2016. So these are counties where the total number of vote casted in are 25% higher than the vote casted in 2016. And so these counties this big increase in the number of new voters shows that these counties are still accepting and are still welcoming new voters. And as we see, out of 8 small counties where we have a voter increase of more than 25%, the Democrats were able to improve in 7, whereas the Republican were able to improve in only 1. And so this shows us clearly that the Democrat or that the immigration toward the state of Nevada favored heavily the Democrat, because they were able to improve in 7 out of 8 small counties that were heavily struck by immigration. However, what was able to counterbalance the effect of immigration in the state of Nevada and to help Republican narrow the gap that separate them from the Democrat, or at least to stay at the same distance from the Democrat compared to 2016, is the fact that the Hispanic voters in the state of Nevada shifted toward the Republicans. They shifted from Democrat to Republican, and this is something that we saw not only in the state of Nevada in this 2020 election, but in many other states. For example, if you remember, we saw that the main reason for the Republican being able to win the state of Florida and to improve their score compared to 2016, was their surge among Hispanic voters. And we also saw this in Texas. What enabled the Republican to keep Texas with them by more than 5 points was the fact that many Hispanic voters shifted toward them. And this is also what happened in the state of Nevada. And the following chart will make you see this clearly. So here we are talking about small counties in which we have more than 20% of the population that is formed from Hispanic voters. So we have 7 such counties in the state of Nevada. And here we see that it's the Republican who improved way more in these counties than the Democrats. We see that they improved in 5 out of 7 small counties where we have more than 20% of Hispanic voters, whereas the Democrats were able to improve in only 2. And this is very important for the Republican, because the only way for Republican to try and win back the state of Nevada is to try and grab more Hispanic voters. They have to try and surge more among the category of Hispanic voters, because it's almost certain that immigration will always play in favor of the Democrat. And so the only way for Republican to counterbalance this effect is to surge among the category of Hispanic voters. And that they did very good in this 2020 election among these voters, and they have to build on this improvement if they want to win the state of Nevada, and also if they want to win any upcoming election in the US. And the Democrats have a lot to fear, because if they end up losing a lot in the category of Hispanic voter, this will not only cause them to lose the state of Nevada, but also to lose big in many other states in the US, because as we said in our first video, Hispanic voters form a big part of of the U.S. population and of the U.S. voters, and most importantly, its ethnic diversity. It's an ethnic group that has been growing way more than the category of white or even black voters. So that being said, if I want to make a small conclusion about what happened in the small counties of Nevada, I can say that immigration is still going on in this state, toward this state, and this is favoring the Democrat. However, the shift in Hispanic voters toward the Republican helped them counterbalance the effect of immigration, and it might help them in the future turn the state back to the red color. That being said, we're done with the small counties of Nevada, and it's time to move to the only big counties of Nevada, which is Clark County. Clark County is the biggest county of Nevada. It's a county that contains around 2/3 of the overall population of Nevada. So as you see here, this is Clark County. It has a population of 2.2 or even 2.3 million U.S. citizens, whereas all the population of Nevada is 3 million. So as I said, it contains more than 66% of the population of Nevada. And so the main election is decided here. The election is mainly decided in Clark County. So as you see here, Clark County is a very diversified county. It has around 41% of white voters, 32% of Hispanic voters, 12% of black voters, and 10% of Asian. And of course, this is the county where we have Las Vegas. Now moving a little bit to the percentage of bachelor degrees. So also it's a percentage that is very close to the percentage to the overall percentage of Nevada. It's 25.6%. And this county mainly rely on casinos and on tourism. And so you will see that this county shifted toward the Republican compared to 2016. Of course, part of this shift was due to the Hispanic voters that, as we saw, shifted from the Democrat toward the Republican. But I think that most importantly, the main reason that led the Republican to do a little bit better here compared to 2016 was the coronavirus pandemic. Because as you know, maybe the county that was the most affected by the coronavirus, not only in Nevada but across all the US, was the county of Clark County, because it has Las Vegas, and Las Vegas literally relies only on casino and on tourism. And because of the COVID restrictions that President Biden was saying that he will take, so a lot of voters in Las Vegas feared for their business, and so decided maybe to vote for President Trump, even though they didn't like him, because he was promising to be less severe concerning the coronavirus restrictions. So moving to the result of Clark County, we see that it's the Republican who were able to improve by 2.1% compared to the 2016 election. We see here that they were able to gain 2.6% in the general result, whereas the Democrat gained only 0.5%, and this led to a shift of 2.1% in favor of the Republican. And so if I want to now give a general conclusion about the state of Nevada, I would say that this is a state to keep an eye on. It's clear that it's a state that has a population that is continuing to go up, mainly because of immigration, and it's also a state that is facing maybe a small change in the way some ethnic groups are voting, especially the Hispanic voters. We see that the Hispanic voters are trending toward the Republican, and so we need to wait. This election in the state of Nevada was hardly affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and so the result that we got here are not necessarily an image of what might happen in the future in the state. So it's a state to keep an eye on. But personally, it's a state that could go both ways. If the Democrats are able to gain back a certain number of their Hispanic voters, or at least if they are able to stop the surge of Republican among this category, I am sure that they were able to keep the state and even to grow their lead. Whereas for Republican, their only way of winning the state again is to rely on Hispanic voters and try to surge even more among them. So it's very difficult to predict what might happen in the following elections in the state of Nevada, but I would give a small advantage for the Democrat. but still we will have to follow up and to see what will happen there. So thank you for listening to this video, and I will see you in the next video where we will be analyzing the last state of this 2020 election, which is the state of Arizona. Thank you.